My stepsister didn't just crash my wedding, she stole the groom at the rehearsal dinner. They humiliated me, took my family home, and thought they'd won. But they forgot I'm a forensic accountant, and I found the one document that would cost them everything. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The champagne in my glass had gone warm, but I was too paralyzed to set it down. I was 45 years old. I was a senior forensic accountant for one of the largest firms in Chicago. I had spent 20 years unraveling corporate fraud, staring down embezzlers, and finding the needles in haystacks that sent powerful men to prison. I was not a woman who panicked. I was not a woman who let emotion override logic. But as I sat at the head table of the private dining room in Le Bernardin, watching the candle flicker in the center of the centerpiece I had paid for, my hands were trembling so violently that the golden liquid in the flute was creating little tidal waves against the crystal. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, the rehearsal dinner. The room was filled with the low, contented hum of 30 of our closest friends and family. My mother was laughing at the far end of the table, clutching a glass of Pinot Grigio. My best friend, Julia, was adjusting her toast notes. Beside me, Andrew, my fiancé, the man I had pulled out of bankruptcy and helped build a contracting business from the ground up, was staring at his plate, sweating through his dress shirt. "Andrew," I whispered, leaning in, "are you all right? You haven't touched your sea bass." He flinched. He actually flinched at the sound of my voice. "I'm fine, Caroline, just nerves. It's hot in here, isn't it?" Before I could answer, the sound of a spoon pinging against a wine glass cut through the air. Sharp, insistent. "Attention, attention everyone." The room fell silent. I looked up to see my stepsister, Tiffany, standing near the entrance of the room. At 32, Tiffany was chaos packaged in designer silk. She was wearing a dress that was technically silver, but under the restaurant lights, it looked dangerously close to white. It was backless, tight, and far more expensive than anything she could afford on her sporadic income as a lifestyle consultant. "Tiffany," my mother said, smiling uncertainly. "Honey, the speeches are after dessert." Tiffany ignored her. She ignored me completely. Her eyes, rimmed with perfectly applied smoky makeup, were locked on one person. "Andrew." "I can't do this anymore," Tiffany announced, her voice trembling with a theatrical kind of emotion that I recognized instantly. It was the same tone she used when she needed rent money or a new car. "I can't sit here and drink this expensive wine and pretend that this charade is right." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Tiffany, sit down, you've had too much to drink." "I haven't had enough," she snapped, finally looking at me with a sneer of pure disdain. "I'm doing this for us, Caroline. I'm doing this for the truth." She walked toward the head table. The guests were murmuring now, an uneasy ripple of tension spreading through the room. Julia reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it hard. Tiffany stopped right in front of Andrew. She didn't look at me. She dropped to her knees. The room gasped, a collective sucked-in breath that sucked the oxygen right out of my lungs. "Andrew," Tiffany said, her voice dropping to a husky whisper that carried perfectly in the silence. "We promised we would stop. We promised we would let Caroline have her safe, boring little life. But looking at you tonight, looking at you trapped in this suit, about to sign your life away to a woman who treats you like an employee instead of a man, I can't let you do it." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a simple silver band, a band I recognized. It was a ring Andrew had lost months ago, or so he had told me. "Marry me, Andrew," she said, tears streaming down her face, tears that looked suspiciously practiced. "Don't marry the bank account. Marry the flame. Marry the woman who actually knows your soul." I looked down at Andrew, waiting for him to laugh. Waiting for him to stand up, tell her she was insane, and have security escort her out. I waited for the man I had loved for 5 years, the man whose debts I had cleared, whose mother's medical bills I had paid, to defend me. Andrew slowly pushed his chair back. He looked at me, and for the first time that night, his eyes were clear. There was no love. In them, there was only relief. "I'm sorry, Caroline," he whispered. He stood up, turned his back on me, and took Tiffany's hands. "Yes," he said. "God, yes, I can't breathe without you, Tiff." He pulled her up and kissed her. Right there, in front of my mother, in front of his parents, in front of the guests eating the meal I had paid for. The glass slipped from my fingers. It hit the table, shattering the stem, and spilled warm champagne all over my lap, but I didn't feel the cold wetness. I didn't feel anything. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, it was in the applause. Because from the back of the room, someone started clapping. And then someone else. And as I stood there, shivering in my ruined dress, I realized the betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness. Because this cancer had been eating my life from the inside out, and I had been the only one who didn't know I was dying. The next 48 hours were a blur of nausea and humiliation that felt less like a breakup and more like a hostile corporate takeover. I spent the night of what should have been my wedding in my apartment, sitting on the floor of my home office, surrounded by cancellation contracts. The venue, the florist, the caterer. Every phone call was a fresh stab wound, a new fee to be paid for a party that was now celebrating my own destruction. My phone had been buzzing incessantly, but I had turned it off after the 10th text from a well-meaning relative telling me that everything happens for a reason. Around 10:00 a.m., the buzzer to my apartment building rang. I checked the video monitor. It was Andrew. A foolish, tiny part of my heart leaped. He's realized, I thought. He's realized he's made a mistake. He's coming to beg for forgiveness. I buzzed him in. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't change out of the oversized sweatpants I had been wearing for 2 days. I opened the door and stood there, leaning against the frame for support. Andrew walked out of the elevator. He wasn't alone. Tiffany was with him, clinging to his bicep like a barnacle. She was wearing one of Andrew's flannel shirts, one I had bought him for Christmas, and a pair of leggings. She looked glowing, triumphant. "Caroline," Andrew said, stopping a few feet from the door. He didn't look ashamed anymore. He looked annoyed. "We need to get the rest of my tools from the garage, and the TV." I blinked, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity. "The TV?" I rasped. My voice was gone. "You broke my heart, humiliated me in front of everyone we know, and you're here for the Sony Bravia." "It's my TV, Caroline," Andrew said, crossing his arms. "I paid for half of it." "You paid for the wall mount," I corrected him, the accountant in me rising to the surface despite the grief. "I paid for the television, the sound system, and the installation. I have the receipts." Tiffany rolled her eyes, resting her head on Andrew's shoulder. "God, see? This is exactly what I was talking about, Drew. She's so transactional. Everything is a receipt with her. There's no passion, just spreadsheets." She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "You should thank us, really. We saved you from a loveless marriage." Andrew was miserable. He felt like he was living with his boss, not his wife. "I was supporting him," I said, my voice shaking. "I paid off his lien. I bought his work truck. I paid his crew when his clients didn't pay on time." "That's just money," Tiffany waved a hand dismissively. "You have plenty of it. You can't buy love, Caroline, Andrew and I. We have a spark, a fire. You wouldn't understand." Andrew finally stepped forward. "Look, let's just make this easy. I'm taking the truck. I'm taking my tools, and we're going to stay at Rosewood for a while." My blood ran cold. Rosewood was my grandmother's estate. Grandma Rose had passed away 4 years ago. It was a sprawling, historic property on the edge of the city, beautiful, old, and expensive to maintain. It had been left in a trust. "You can't stay at Rosewood," I said quietly. "That's family property." "Exactly," Tiffany beamed. "Family. Mom said it was okay. She said since we're technically married now, we went to the courthouse this morning, by the way, we need a start. And since you have this fancy apartment in the city and you're obviously single now. She flashed a ring at me. It wasn't the silver band from the night before. It was my engagement ring, the vintage sapphire I had picked out, the one Andrew was supposed to give me. He kept the receipt, Tiffany giggled, so technically it was his to give. I looked at the ring on her finger. I looked at Andrew, who was refusing to meet my eyes, scuffing his work boots on my hallway runner. "Mom gave you the keys?" I asked. "She did," Andrew said, his voice hardening. "She understands that true love is messy. She wants us to have a good start. Unlike you, she's not obsessed with who paid for what." They pushed Pa. Sent me, I didn't stop them. I watched as they raided the hallway closet, taking Andrew's coat, his boots, and then, inexplicably, a vase I had bought in Italy. "We'll need this for the foyer at Rosewood," Tiffany said, tucking it under her arm. "That place is so dusty, it needs a woman's touch." They walked to the elevator, loaded down with my things, wearing my ring, heading to my grandmother's house. "Bye, Caroline," Tiffany called out as the doors closed. "Try to be happy for us. It's bad karma to be bitter." The doors slid shut. I stood in the silence of the hallway. Most people would have screamed. Most people would have thrown something. I didn't. I walked calmly back into my apartment, went to my office, and sat down at my desk. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound file. It was the original trust agreement for the Rosewood estate. My mother, Andrew, and Tiffany all thought Rosewood was just a house that had been left to the family to use as they pleased. They thought the deed was a simple piece of paper. They saw walls, a roof, and a free place to live. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Grandma Rose didn't believe in unconditional love, and neither did the lawyers she had hired to draft her will. I opened the file, my finger tracing the fine print of Article 4, Section C. "Let them move in," I whispered to the empty room. "Let them get comfortable." To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the investment, not just the emotional one, but the literal, financial life support I had provided for Andrew. I met Andrew 5 years ago when I hired him to redo the cabinetry in my kitchen. He was charming, rugged, and had a sad story about a divorce that left him with nothing but a beat-up Ford F-150 and a bag of hammers. I was 40, focused on my career, and admittedly lonely. I fell for the potential I saw in him. Over 5 years, I became the silent partner in his life. When the IRS came after him for back taxes he'd forgotten to file for 3 years, I wrote the check, $42,000. When he wanted to expand his business but couldn't get a loan because his credit score was in the low 500s, I co-signed. Actually, I didn't just co-sign, I put up my investment portfolio as collateral. I convinced myself it was a partnership. I told myself he brought warmth and spontaneity to my rigid, calculated life. And then there was Tiffany. Tiffany was my stepsister, the daughter of the man my mother married when I was 20. She was 12 years younger than me, and from the moment she entered our lives, she was the fragile one, the one who needed help. Tiffany couldn't hold a job because bosses were intimidated by her energy. Tiffany couldn't pay rent because the universe was teaching her a lesson about detachment. Tiffany needed a new car because the old one didn't vibe with her aura. And who paid? My mother, mostly. And when my mother ran short, she came to me. "Caroline, you're doing so well," she'd say. "You can afford to help your sister get back on her feet." I had spent a decade enabling them, and now they had combined forces. 2 weeks after the wedding I received a notification on my phone. It was from the shared security system at Rosewood. I hadn't revoked my own access yet. I wanted to see. I pulled up the camera feed for the living room. Rosewood was a sanctuary. Grandma Rose had filled it with mahogany furniture, Persian rugs, and first edition books. It was a place of quiet dignity. On the screen, I saw Andrew and Tiffany hosting a party. There were red plastic cups on Grandma's antique Steinway piano. There were people I didn't know, Andrew's rowdy construction friends, Tiffany's influencer friends, smoking cigarettes inside the house. I watched as Tiffany stood on the velvet sofa in her muddy boots, popping a bottle of champagne. The spray hit the oil painting of my great-grandfather. "To the manor born," Tiffany shrieked, laughing as she swigged directly from the bottle. Andrew was sitting in Grandma's favorite wingback chair, his feet up on the coffee table. He looked different. The humility he used to fake around me was gone. He looked arrogant. He looked like the lord of the manor. "Babe," Andrew yelled over the music. "When are we getting the pool put in? I'm thinking we dig up that old rose garden in the back. It's just weeds anyway." My heart hammered against my ribs. The rose garden. Grandma Rose's pride and joy. She had planted those bushes 50 years ago. Her ashes were scattered there. "Next week," Tiffany yelled back. "I'm meeting with the landscaper. I told him to just bulldoze the whole back lot. We need space for a hot tub." They were parasites. Polished, pretty parasites who had latched onto the healthiest host they could find, me, and when they had sucked me dry of my dignity, they moved on to the carcass of my family legacy. They thought they had won the lottery. They had house. They had each other. They had the sympathy of the family, who viewed them as star-crossed lovers, and me as the cold, bitter spinster who couldn't keep a man. I closed the laptop. I could have called the police. I could have driven over there and screamed until my throat bled. I could have sued Andrew for the money he owed me, though I knew he didn't have a dime. But that was small thinking. That was emotional thinking. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Henderson and Associates," a crisp voice answered. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, cold, and deadly calm. "This is Caroline. I need to schedule a formal audit of the Rosewood Trust. Specifically, I need to trigger the moral stewardship clause." There was a pause on the line. Then, the old lawyer let out a dry, knowing chuckle. "I wondered when you would call, Caroline. I'll have the paperwork ready in the morning." I hung up. They wanted a war? Fine. They were fighting with emotions. I was fighting with forensics. And in my world, the numbers never lie, but they do cut like a knife. The morning I walked into Mr. Henderson's office, I wasn't the heartbroken bride anymore. I was the auditor. I wore my charcoal gray suit, the one I wore when I was dismantling executives who thought they could hide offshore accounts. I carried my briefcase not like a purse, but like a weapon. Mr. Henderson was 70, sharp as a tack, and the only person in the world who respected my grandmother as much as I did. He had the rosewood files spread out on his mahogany desk. "You look terrible, Caroline," he said warmly, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you, Arthur. I feel like a new woman." He tapped a finger on the yellowing parchment of the original deed. "Your grandmother was a visionary, you know. She knew her children, and she certainly knew her grandchildren." "She knew Tiffany," I corrected. "Indeed. Now, let's review the situation. Your mother, acting as the primary trustee, gave the keys to Tiffany and Andrew. She believes she has the right to allow family members to reside in the property." "She does," I said. "Article 2, Section A, the property may be used as a primary residence for direct descendants." "Correct," Henderson nodded. "However, she didn't read to the end of the document. Most people don't." He flipped to the back of the file. "Article 8, the Maintenance and Solvency Stipulation, or, as Rose liked to call it, the No Freeloaders Clause." I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in weeks. The clause was brutal in its simplicity. It stated that any resident of Rosewood was solely responsible for the property taxes, utilities, and structural maintenance of the estate. Furthermore, it required that the residents maintain a solvency ratio, meaning they could not have personal debts exceeding 40% of their income while living in the home, to ensure the estate wasn't put at risk of liens. But the kicker, the absolute genius of Grandma Rose, was the historical integrity addendum. "It says here," Henderson read, peering over his spectacles, No structural changes, including landscaping alterations to the perimeter gardens, may be made without the unanimous written consent of all living beneficiaries. All living beneficiaries, I repeated. That includes me. It does. And if they violate these terms? Henderson smiled, a shark-like grin that warmed my heart. The trust dissolves the residency rights immediately, and not only are they evicted, but they become liable for retroactive rent at the current market value for every day they occupied the property, plus damages. Market value for a 10-bedroom historic estate in this zip code. I did the mental math. That's roughly $8,000 a month. Plus the cost of restoring any unauthorized changes, Henderson added. They're planning to dig up the rose garden next week, I said. Andrew wants to put in a pool. Henderson closed the file. Let them dig. We need them to break the ground. Once that shovel hits the dirt, they've violated the trust. In the meantime, Caroline, I need you to do what you do best. Prove they're insolvent. If we can hit them with the structural violation and the financial violation simultaneously, there's no judge in the state who will grant them leniency. I stood up. I'll need to hire a PI to get their current financials. Andrew is slippery with his books. Do it, Henderson said. And Caroline. Yes. Don't warn them, Rose wouldn't have. I didn't hire just any PI. I hired Marcus, a former fraud investigator I worked with on the Enron cleanup. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. For 3 weeks, I waited. I stayed silent. I let my mother leave voicemails telling me I was being childish for not coming to Sunday dinner at Rosewood. I let Tiffany post Instagram stories of herself lounging in my grandmother's library, captioning them Old Money Manor Liff. Hey. I watched them destroy the house. Marcus sent me photos. They had painted the original oak paneling in the dining room a garish bright white. They had ripped out the vintage sconces. And, true to their word, a massive excavator was sitting in the middle of the decimated rose garden. A gaping hole had replaced 50 years of history. But the financial report Marcus delivered was even more damning. Andrew hadn't just moved in, he had leveraged his ownership of the house to take out high-interest business loans. He was telling creditors he owned Rosewood. He had racked up $80,000 in debt in 3 weeks, buying a new truck, jet skis, and financing Tiffany's lifestyle brand. They were drowning, and they were using my grandmother's legacy as a life raft. It was time. I chose my moment carefully. My mother's birthday. They were hosting a dinner at Rosewood. The whole family would be there. I pulled up the long gravel driveway in my sensible sedan. The lawn was littered with construction debris. Andrew's new truck was parked on the grass, next to the fountain. I walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key. The foyer was unrecognizable. The vase they had stolen from me was filled with cheap, dyed blue carnations. The air smelled of stale beer and expensive perfume. Caroline. My mother froze. She was coming out of the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. Oh, honey, you came. I knew you'd come around. She set the tray down and tried to hug me. I stepped back. I'm not here for the party, Mom. The noise from the dining room died down. Tiffany and Andrew walked out. Tiffany was wearing a silk kimono that I'm fairly certain was antique and belonged to Grandma. Andrew was holding a beer. Well, Tiffany smirked. Look who crawled out of her hole. Finally realized you can't punish us forever. Get out, I said. Andrew laughed. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of my house. It's not your house, Caroline, Andrew sneered, stepping forward to loom over me. It's the family's house. Your mom gave us permission. We live here now. We're actually improving the place, which is more than you ever did. Improving? I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of photos. I threw them on the hall table. Photos of the painted wood, the ruined garden, the tire tracks on the lawn. You destroyed a historic landmark, I said, and you violated the trust. Trust, SH must, Tiffany waved a hand. Grandma is dead, Caroline. She doesn't care about the roses. We're putting in a pool. It increases the property value. You should be thanking us. I'm not thanking you, I said, my voice rising for the first time. I'm evicting you. I slammed the thick legal packet onto the table, next to the photos. This is a notice to quit. You have violated Article 8, Section C of the Rosewood Trust, unauthorized structural alteration. You have also violated the solvency clause. I looked at Andrew. I know about the loans, Andrew. I know you used this address to secure $80,000 in credit from predatory lenders. That is fraud. You don't own this house. You don't even pay rent here. Andrew's face went pale. You looked at my finances. I audited you, I corrected, and you failed. Tiffany grabbed the papers and threw them on the floor. This is garbage. Mom, tell her to stop. Tell her this is our house. My mother looked between us, wringing her hands. Caroline, please, can't we just discuss this? They're just getting started. They're expecting a baby. The room stopped. A baby, I whispered. Tiffany grinned, placing a hand on her stomach. That's right, I'm pregnant, so you can't kick us out. No judge will put a pregnant woman on the street. You lose, Caroline, again. The pregnancy announcement was a masterstroke. It was a shield, and she knew it. My mother dissolved into tears of joy, hugging Tiffany, completely forgetting that I had just accused them of fraud. A baby at Rosewood, Mom sobbed, just like Rose wanted. I stood there, feeling the walls closing in. If she was pregnant, the optics of evicting her would be horrific. I would look like a monster. You're lying, I said quietly. Am I? Tiffany challenged. Do you want to see the ultrasound? I don't care, Andrew said, emboldened by the news. Get out, Caroline, you're trespassing. This is my family's home now. I turned and walked out, but I wasn't defeated. I was calculating. I called Henderson from the car. She says she's pregnant, I said. Does she? Henderson mused. That complicates the timeline, but not the law. The trust doesn't have a pregnancy exemption for destruction of property. It's not just the property anymore, I said, watching the house through my rearview mirror. Andrew committed bank fraud. He listed himself as owner on those loan applications. I saw the documents Marcus pulled. That's a felony, Henderson said. Yes, and if the bank finds out he collateral, the house, isn't his, they'll call the loans immediately. He'll be bankrupt in 24 hours. Are you ready to pull that trigger, Caroline? That's the nuclear option. I thought about the rose garden. I thought about Andrew flinching at my voice. I thought about Tiffany's smirk. Not yet, I said. I need one more thing. I need to know if the pregnancy is real. For the next week, I became a ghost. I didn't sleep, I dug. I went through Tiffany's social media archives going back 5 years. I cross-referenced her check-ins with Andrew's work schedule. And then I found it. A post from 3 years ago. Tiffany tagged at a clinic in Miami. Fresh Start #knew me. I zoomed in on the wristband she was wearing in the photo. It wasn't a spa, it was a surgical center. I called a contact I had in medical billing. A favor owed from a case I worked 2 years ago involving insurance fraud. I didn't ask for medical records. That would be illegal. I asked for a billing code verification associated with a specific date and facility name that Tiffany had so kindly geotagged. It was a tubal ligation, my contact confirmed 2 hours later. Elective sterilization, paid in cash. The air left my lungs. She wasn't pregnant. She couldn't be pregnant. It was a lie to anchor Andrew, a lie to secure the house, a lie to manipulate my mother. And she was using a non-existent child to hold my grandmother's legacy hostage. I had them on property destruction. I had them on bank fraud. And now I had them on the most despicable lie of all. I didn't just want them out. I wanted them exposed. I called Henderson. Draft the eviction order, and call the bank that holds Andrew's loans. Tell them the owner of Rosewood is about to be served with a lawsuit for fraud. And the family, Henderson asked, how do you want to handle them? There's a memorial service for Grandma Rose next Sunday, I said. At the church. Everyone will be there, including Andrew and Tiffany. You're going to do it there. No, I said. I'm going to do it at the reception, at Rosewood. I want them to be standing in the house they stole when they lose it. The reception was in full swing when I arrived. It was a grotesque display of irony. My family was celebrating the life of Grandma Rose while standing in the very carcass of her legacy, drinking wine paid for by credit card debt that would never be honored. I walked in through the French doors of the patio. I wasn't alone. Walking beside me was Arthur Henderson, clutching his briefcase, and two uniformed sheriff's deputies. The room went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. My mother, who had been cooing over Tiffany near the fireplace, froze. Caroline, Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. What is this? Why are the police here? Tiffany stood up, placing a protective hand over her flat stomach. Oh my God, she cried out, her voice pitching up into a practiced wail. She's trying to stress me out. She wants me to lose the baby. Andrew, do something. Andrew stormed over, his face flushed with alcohol and bravado. Get out, Caroline. I told you you're trespassing. Officers, remove this woman from my property. The deputy closest to me didn't move. He looked at Andrew with a flat, unimpressed expression. We're here to serve an eviction order, sir, and a warrant for seizure of assets. Eviction, Andrew laughed, a nervous barking sound. You can't evict us. We own this place. Ask her mother. Actually, Mr. Henderson stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room like a gavel. You don't. The Rosewood Trust owns this property. And as of 9:00 a.m. this morning, the trust has dissolved your residency rights due to catastrophic violation of historical integrity. Henderson pulled a large, glossy photograph from his file. He held it up for the room to see. It was an aerial shot of the backyard, the gaping mud pit where the rose garden used to be. You dug up the roses, Henderson said, his voice shaking with genuine anger. You violated Article 8, but that's the least of your problems. Andrew looked at the photo, then at me. So, it's a garden, we're putting in a pool. No, I said, stepping closer. You're not, because you have no money, Andrew, you have debt. I pulled out the bank documents. I spoke to the loan officer at City National this morning, the one who approved your $80,000 business loan, the one you secured by listing 14 Rosewood Lane as your asset. The color drained from Andrew's face. He looked like a man who had been shot. That's bank fraud, Andrew, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where his parents were standing, horrified. You pledged collateral you don't own. The bank has called the loan. They are seizing your truck, your equipment, and garnishing your future wages until every cent is paid back. You are bankrupt. Again. You called them, Andrew W.H. Ispard, you ruined me. You ruined yourself, I replied. I just turned on the lights. Tiffany shrieked. Stop it. Stop attacking him. We're having a baby. You're a monster, Caroline. You're jealous because I'm giving this family an heir and you're just a bitter, barren old maid. My mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Caroline, please, enough. Think of the child. Think of your sister's condition. The room was heavy with judgment. I could feel the eyes of my aunts and uncles burning into me. How could she? They were thinking. How could she do this to a pregnant woman? This was the moment, the point of no return. I looked at Tiffany. She was glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hate. She thought she had won. She thought the baby card was the trump card that trumped logic, law, and truth. There is no baby, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence at the wedding. How dare you? Tiffany hissed. I dare, I said, because I know about Miami. Tiffany's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Miami, Andrew asked, looking between us. What about Miami? I turned to Andrew. 3 years ago, May 14th. The wellness retreat Tiffany went to, the one Mom paid for. I pulled the final piece of paper from my bag. It wasn't a medical record. I knew better than that. It was an itemized insurance rejection letter that Tiffany had carelessly left in a box of old mail at Mom's house years ago, which I had found while helping Mom organize her taxes. I had saved it, just in case. "It wasn't a retreat, Andrew," I said softly. "It was a clinic, a surgical clinic. Tiffany had a tubal ligation. She cannot get pregnant. She hasn't been able to get pregnant for 3 years." Andrew froze. He looked at Tiffany. He looked at her stomach, which she was still clutching. "Tiff," he croaked, "tell her she's lying. Tell her you're pregnant." Tiffany scrambled back, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "She's faking it. She forged it. She's crazy." "I didn't forge anything," I said calmly. "And if you want to prove me wrong, let's go to the hospital right now. I'll pay for the ultrasound. Let's go." Tiffany didn't move. She couldn't. Andrew stared at her. The realization hit him in waves. The house wasn't his. His business was gone. He was facing felony fraud charges. And the miracle baby, the reason he had justified betraying me, the reason he had stuck with her through the chaos, was a lie. "You," Andrew stammered, his face turning a dark, violent shade of red. "You lied to me. I left her." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "I left the best thing that ever happened to me because you said we had a connection, because you said we were building a family." "Andrew, baby, listen." Tiffany tried to reach for him. "Don't touch me," Andrew screamed. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. "It was all a lie. You're nothing. You have nothing." He turned to me, his eyes wild, desperate. He took a step toward me, his hands out, pleading. Caroline, I didn't know. You have to believe me. She tricked me. I can fix this. We can fix this. Tell the bank it was a mistake, please." I looked at the man I had once thought I would spend my life with. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the weakness in his jaw. I saw a man who didn't love anyone, not even himself. "There is no we, Andrew," I said coldly. "And I can't fix bank fraud. You did that." I turned to the deputies. "Officers, I believe these trespassers have been given sufficient notice. Please remove them from the premises. The locks are being changed in 1 hour." The eviction was swift and ugly. Andrew didn't leave quietly. He was dragged out, screaming curses at Tiffany, screaming pleas at me. The deputies had to put him in handcuffs when he tried to take a swing at the contractor who had arrived to secure the site. Tiffany left in tears, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. She tried to cling to my mother, but for the first time in her life, my mother didn't open her arms. Mom stood on the porch, staring at the ruined garden, finally seeing the destruction her enabling had caused. She looked old. She looked broken. "I didn't know," Mom whispered to me as Tiffany's car, which was also about to be repossessed, peeled out of the driveway. "I really didn't know about the surgery, Caroline." "I know, Mom," I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "But you knew about the rest, and you let it happen." I didn't stay to comfort her. I had work to do. The aftermath was exactly as Mr. Henderson had predicted. Andrew was charged with 3 counts of bank fraud. He pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy trial and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, plus restitution. His construction business was liquidated. His truck, his tools, and yes, even the Sony Bravia he had stolen from my apartment were sold at auction to pay his debts. Tiffany moved in with a friend. Then another friend, and eventually ended up in a small studio apartment paid for by the state. Without Andrew to fund her lifestyle and without the pregnancy to manipulate the family, her social circle evaporated. She tried to reach out to me once, sending a text that said sister, but I blocked the number without a second thought. As for Rosewood, the trust put the house up for auction to settle the debts incurred by the tenants. Because of the destroyed garden and the interior damage, the appraisal came in low. I bought it. I didn't buy it as a trust beneficiary. I bought it as Caroline, the successful forensic accountant. I paid cash. It took me 2 years to restore the house. I stripped the white paint off the mahogany. I found the original sconces in a pawn shop where Tiffany had sold them and bought them back. And the gardens. I spent the most time on the garden. I hired a master horticulturist to heal the soil. We filled in the hole where the pool was supposed to go. We replanted the rose bushes, Grandma's favorite variety, Double Delight. One crisp autumn evening, I sat on the back patio of rosewood. The house was quiet. The air smelled of wood smoke and blooming roses. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Julia. "Dinner at 7. I found a new guy I want you to meet. He's an architect, and he pays his own taxes." I smiled. I looked out at the garden. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. I wasn't just a survivor of betrayal, I was the architect of my own justice. I had lost a fiancé, yes, I had lost a sister, but I had found myself. I had found my backbone. I took a sip of my wine, a vintage that was actually cold this time, and typed back, "I'll be there." I set the phone down and watched the first star appear above the healed earth of my grandmother's garden. The karma hadn't just hit the wrongdoers, it had liberated the righteous. And the view from the high ground was spectacular.